And why security important? See, security breach is one of the most dreaded news for a company. Consider a company like Facebook or Amazon or Google, and there is one single news that there was a security breach with this applications. Your stock price goes very down, right? And it is a big loss. So it, like, having secured application is basically you're protecting your brand. And we get a lot of attacks that happens, like CSRF attacks, authentication attacks. So you can just check those attacks. Like, I will talk about those attacks and what are the various ways we can work upon this. So let's start. Let's go to the Spring Initializer and check how it works. So I'll go to Spring Initializer. It's a famous, like, basic website, right? I go back here, and what do I want to create? So I want to create a Java-based application on Maven 3.3.2. Let me call it as CWZ, form.cwz. My artifact is what? Spring Security Playground. And I will name my package as form.cwz. That is fine. I make it jar. I will use Java 17. I want web. So what are the dependencies I'm looking for? Web. What are the other dependencies I'm looking for? Lombok. I want security, obviously, because I'm making a security video. And then I've added Lombok. I have added security. Let's add DevTools. So it allows me to do the quick restart of my application. I generate this. So the application, I've got it in zip file. Let me put this in a specific folder. I've created an app folder somewhere, and I keep it. And let me start with my IntelliJ. IntelliJ, let me open my application. So I go to my J drive. Wherever your folder is kept, wherever you have kept this whole thing, just go there, and we have got my folder called as Code with Z Academy, Spring Security App. Okay, I think I never extracted it. So let me extract it quickly here. You need to make sure you extract it. And inside my app, I have got this Spring Security Playground. The application, basic application available here. So if you see your pom.xml, it is all loading up data from here. You can quickly go to Maven and do a quick load of the application. Okay. So that is fine. Then if you start this application, you'll see it will build. And the very first thing that happens here, I want you to check. See, it is giving you a user generated security password. So let us see this in action. How does this password will come into picture now? Consider in my main, I go to Java, and here I create a package by the name of controllers. And inside my controller, I add up a hello controller. So I say Java class hello controller. Under my hello controller, I say REST controller. After my REST controller, I will just simply say public string, say hello, and I return, let's say hello world, and I mark it as get mapping for slash hello. Now, let's see. If I reload my application, and this application is hosted on 8080, if I go back, let me say http colon slash slash localhost 8080 slash hello. It will ask me, can you please add up a username and password? Now, what is the username here? By default, username is user. And what is the password? One which is generated for you. What this is the generated password. This is how you will simply go here and access your username and password, and you say it is hello world. Yeah, I get the access to that. If I try to access the same thing using Postman, see, I have called the same implementation. What you need to do is I'll start from beginning. Let's say you want to call hello, and I say NoOp, and I send. So initially it is saying me what 401 unauthorized. The reason being because same thing is also required from here. What you do in your authorization, you select basic authentication. Username is user, password is this one. So you simply pick this up, go back to your postman, add the password here, and you send. And now you get hello world, and you see in the cookies, you get a J session ID. As long as this session ID is alive, you will not face any problem firing. So, for example, I just add one more API, public string, say hi, and return hi. And this time I say add get mapping of slash hi, and if I say hi, so it is still unauthorized because it's not working. But see, I am not updating the username password, but I go here and I say hi, enter. See, it is giving me the output. At the same time, I send this here, and this will give me unauthorized because this is happening from Postman. But if you check the browser, because that session ID is set into the cookies, it will be used again and again and again. So till the point that J session ID is working, we won't be able to go past. Like this will be still as an authenticated user. So this is the basic level authentication, which is security flow. This is very, very important to understand this flow, because once this flow is understood, understanding Spring security will be very easy. Whenever user enter the credential, it first land upon the authentication filter. It's an inbuilt filter. Yeah, it's an inbuilt filter, authentication filter. It allows us to work with a lot of different filtrations technique. Now, authentication object is the first object which will be created. Remember this. Authentication object will be the first object which will be created. Authentication basically represents a user object. So it will have your email, it will have your password, and so on. So consider it's a user representation object which will be passed on to the authentication manager. This is again very important. What is going to be your authentication manager? Something you can take over and then proceed ahead. So authentication manager allows you to connect with the authentication provider. Authentication provider can be many, which they will internally talk with user detail service. So these two are again very important aspects: user detail service and password encoder. Now user detail service defines like whether my user will be coming from in memory or it will be coming from a database. In our situation, I will be using PostgreSQL. And for password encoder, we have got bcrypt, or what type of password encoder I want to use. Leaving your password in this plain text is not a good practice. Then after, whether they have been authenticated or not authenticated, authentication manager will let it know to the filter, which will basically update your security context. Now, remember one thing in terms of IT field, context always means the environment. Yeah. So now, if something happens, this environment will be taken care of. This is, it will be added to the environment. The token will be added here. Do I want to remove the token? Do I need to validate? It will be checked with my security context. So this is something we'll have to. This is the whole flow of my Spring security. So let's go and make some changes into our application now. So first, what I want to do is I want to jump into my application and I want to go to my properties file, which is kept inside the resources under application.properties. What I want to do under my application.properties here is I want to add certain settings. First is what? Spring security.user.name is equal to, let's say, CWZ, and Spring security dot user dot password is equal to, let's say, 12345. I keep a very basic username and password. Then I want to add two more settings. I want to set up the trace and I want to change how does the logging is happening right now. So I just add up these two these two settings here. Like log level, I'm setting it to trace, and what is the pattern I want my log into. So you will see there is a green color, then there will be a blue color, red color for the thread, then there will be a yellow color for the logger, and then there will be the message after I reload after making these changes. So if I reload this now and I run this, you will see my logs have changed that for a very good way. And one thing which you will see is missing here is I'm no longer getting that generated password because I have told via my configuration that I don't want the username password which is generated from Spring security. Let me use my own. So we are taking baby steps. First step, let's go there. Now, if I try to call hi, see, because it is still using the value from the previous data, I will just clear the history for last 1 hour and then I will try calling hi again. This time, see, this time I will have to say CWZ as my username and password is what? 12345. And I try to sign in. Now it is giving me hi. So this way, what we have done in this particular step is we have updated. Like we don't want the generated username password, but in fact we want the other one. And you see there are multiple filters which are also coming into the scenario. There are basically 16 filters which are getting called in my filter. After that, first time access was denied, so it was logged here. Then after that, I got logged in, and you can check how this is working ahead. So I got secured and I continued to this particular part. Okay. So this is how my first changes in my application happen. Let's have a brief discussion about various components which are there. First is my authentication filter, a filter that intercepts and perform authentication of a particular request by delegating it to the authentication manager. If authentication is successful, authentication detail is sent into the security context. Authentication, as I said, is using the supplied value from username and password. An authentication object will be created form, which will be given as an input to the authentication manager. Once it received request from the filter, it delegates the validating of user details to the authentication provider. Authentication provider, it contains all the logic of validating user using user detail service. This is an inbuilt class, and also the password encoder for this part. Then we have got user detail service. It retrieves the user details and it implements the user interface. So we are going to see the working of this user details and user interface using the supplied username. Yeah, and then we have got the password encoder, which is nothing but a service interface for encoding my password. This is again a very important aspect which we want to continue with. So what am I? And security context. So security context basically is an interface defining the minimum security information associated with the current thread of execution. It holds the authentication data post successful authentication. I told you it's like an environment. You keep it there. So what am I going? What is my plan? Is I will be using this application, which is where I want to release certain APIs. So what are these APIs I want to release? Is I have got contact and notices. I want them to be created without any security. This should be in my green zone. Like I don't need any security to be executed. But on other hand, account, balance, loans, and cards. These all services should be logged only using the, like basically it should be available only after the application is secured. So I want to implement this. Only one change that I will like to make here is rather than calling it slash my account, I will call it as accounts. Here I will call it as balance. Here I will call it as slash loans. And here I will call it as slash cards. So let us quickly go and create this controllers. In my controller, you can simply go and create a Java class. Let us call it as account controller. Then in my account controller, what I do is I'm copy pasting code from my solution scenario. So in interest of time, so we have got slash accounts. So if you see, it's a get mapping. What it is doing for slash accounts, get account detail, it is returning just a simple string. Then I add another Java class. Let me call it as balance controller. Under my balance controller, what I do is again, let me just add up these details. Get mapping slash balance and return the balance. I'm not writing anything fancy in my controller. I would like to keep it normal. Then I have got my cards controller. In my cards controller, I will again create a mapping for my cards slash cards, and it will give me the details from DB, which is not connected to the actual DB. Then I create my contact controller. In my contact controller, you can figure out this data from here. So I've got my contact controller. So inquiry, yeah, it is stored to the DB. And at this point, I will also add a Java class for loans controller. So in my loans controller, what I do is I will copy paste my loans/loans. You can check it out from here. And notice controller, you can, I have one more controller, which is my notice controller. So in my notice controller, I am adding slash notices. And just for our sake of working, let me simply make this project okay, security. So the position is security playground. And share. Okay, let me just create my repo from here. Okay, then I make a commit. Let me call. I have added controllers and config and credentials are for now. Credentials are in app.properties file. Okay. It will ask me where do I want to commit. So I select all the files right now. I commit. Then I want to push. So I say let's push it. It will ask me to add a remote. Okay. I have created a remote and I have added it here and I push it. So what will happen now is if you go to my repository, that is code with Z. If you go, like best way to find my repository is just go to my blogging website and pick it up from here. So you know where the GitHub repo is. And I create my, if you check the repository, Spring Security app. So this much part is already now available. Yeah, all the controllers which I have added are already there. So we can now proceed and see. All the controllers are already available here. That's fine. As per our requirement, what is supposed to be done now? Contact and notice controller should be outside the security zone, and others should be the part of my security. Yeah, they should be authenticated every time they are used. So for doing that, let me introduce a management implementation here, which is what we will call as config. So I will create a package first here. Let me call that package as what config. And in that config, let me create a new Java class. Let me call it as project security config. It's a class. Okay, it's a class. You will mark this class with add configuration. You will mark this class with add configuration. And here you have to release a bean. So if you want to check what exactly, how do we specify this? Okay, so as I have added the configuration file, let me see what we are trying to override here. So I go here, I say Spring Boot web security configuration. How will you open this? You go to navigate, you search everywhere and you type Spring Boot web security configuration. This is basically the class which is responsible for taking care of your configuration right now. It's a see what does the documentation say. If you want, you can see there is a button here, download sources, if you have not done it already. So the default configuration for web securities, it relies upon the Spring Security Content Negotiation Strategy. And if the user specifies their own security filter chain bean, this will back off completely and user will be should specify all the bits that they want to configure. So what will I do? If you see, there is a default security chain here. It is returning a bean of what type? Security filter chain. That is what they say with HTTP security. And if you see, for every request, they are authenticating. Yeah, for HTTP form login as well as for HTTP basic. So form login is when you try to log in from the form. HTTP basic is when you get from the API. So what I do, I copy this much part now and I bring in into my current application where I don't want the order. I am not looking for order. And here, what I do, see, this is where I am overriding my actual authentication. So I am authorizing my requests. Yeah, I am authorizing my request. Now there are two modes where which can be done here. First is for request.any request. I can say for HTTP authorize request. I have got my request. For any request, I can actually make it what? Permit all. This way, it will be useless. This way, it will be useless. Let me keep it like that only. First, I say permit all. This will make it useless. Irrespective whatever you do, every request will go past. See. So if I do this, and now, even though I have the authentication implemented, it will just go past this. See, even if I just clear my browsing history and I say clear data, that is fine. And now if I go to, see, I'm accessing accounts for first time, right? So if I say accounts, I get in there. If I say loans, I get in there. So no use. So I do what? Let me comment this one, first one. So this is of no use. Plus we have also one called as deny all. Now what will deny all do? It will also do the same thing. It will but opposite. So if I restart my, if I call this, see, it will every time, like even if I pass the correct username and password, it will obviously let me go ahead, but it is denying me. I have no authorization to view this page. So this will also kill my purpose for authorization. So what I need to do is I need to write my own implementation here. And what is that implementation? For every request which are coming in, I will specify. Yeah, for every requests which are coming in, I will specify what do I want to do here. So for requests which are coming in, request dot I will try to match up. So here we have got some matches. Request dot request matcher. If my request comes for slash accounts, if my request comes for slash loans, if my request comes for slash cards, if my request comes for slash balance, then what I want to do, I want this request to be authenticated. Yeah, I want this request to be what? Authenticated. So I don't need this extra bracket here. So this request are what required to be authenticated. Okay. Then I'll just put this period sign here so that it does not create any unnecessary confusion. And then dot request matches for what? Slash notices slash contact and slash errors, because this is where you see the error. I want this to be permitted. So I say permit all. Simple option. I apply this. So now you will see not everywhere. I will restart my application. But if you write your authentication for one of them, it won't create any problem. So I go back. I say slash loans, enter. Okay, because now it was permitted. I will just quickly, you have to keep on doing this while you are new to Spring Security to understand its working. So what I do, I call for loans. So it's not allowing. But if I say localhost and then 8080 and then I call for let's say notices, which is an allowed API. So it is allowing it here. But if I call for loans, it is blocking me. I pass CWZ and then I pass 12345 and I sign in. See, this time it is allowing me, and because that session is registered in my browser now, so even if I say accounts, it will allow me to go ahead. So I hope this makes sense how we create a simple security like with a configuration file. And I did not write a single line. I just went to the file, copy pasted because that was the default in it. Spring Boot Web Security. Okay, so the next part where we are going to focus in this particular scenario is we'll take care of the user details. Now, even you saw that I have one common username password for across my application. I don't want that. So what I want to do now is we have got this user details interface. This details interface is implemented by details service, and details service is extended by details manager. Now, if you see, there are certain functions here. First, first type of function here is, let's color code it properly. So we have got user details. Now this user details have methods like get username, get password, is account expired, locked, non-locked, and so on. On other hand, we have got user detail service. User detail service have just one function called as what? Get user by, load user by username. And then we have got user details manager where we are responsible for creating the user, deleting the user, changing the password, if check whether the user exists or not. And then based on that, we have got three different implementation. We can manage the user in memory. We can use JDBC, which we are going to do that. And LDAP is a advanced one, which we are not going to cover LDAP here, but we'll cover up the in memory and JDBC. So let's start with that. Implement this new part, what we need to do is we no longer need in my application.properties, I will get rid of this two things. I'll just comment it off. I don't need this anymore. And what I do next is in my config, I specify that I want to use a user details. This time I am using I'll go to my configuration and this time I want to release a bean. So I say I have a bean which I want to register with my Spring context. So here what I have is a method called as public user details service, which is an inbuilt user details service. And we have got user details service. And what do I release from here? So here I create user details object. So user details user object is equal to, how do I create? There is a class for it. So I have got a class called as user. User have with username. So let's say my username is what? User dot password is, let's say, password here. And we say what are the authorities. So I call dot authorities. So let's say they are made for read only. And then I say dot build. So this is how we create first inbuilt user. Then I create another one. So let's try to do simple copy paste it. This time I want to make it as an admin user. So here I have got admin. And my password is, let's say, 54321. And I call the authorities of, let's say, right. And so on. Then read as well. Now I do what? Create a new in-memory user details manager and I pass this. So if you check in-memory user details manager, it takes an user details object, but it is using varying characters. So varying input. So I can pass as many as users I want and it will keep on creating the user from its user details. So this is, we are creating the user in memory now. Yeah, we are creating the user in memory. I reload this. If I go back, let me as a practice delete my browsing history so that I don't get into this problem anymore. And okay, I call loans. This time it is asking me to pass on the details, but this time let's say I pass admin 54321 and I say sign. So it gave me an error password encoder. Yeah, see, this is a password encoder. It is asking me, you have entered a password with no password encoder. If that is your intent, it should be prefixed with NoOp, that is no password encoder. So this is one of the problem which we deal with. So I'll do what? Make a commit till this point. Simply, I'll just make a commit till this point. So that you will also face this issue and then you know how to come out of this problem. So what we need to do is we need to add a prefix. It says that if you intentionally don't want to use the password, do what? Just go there and add NoOp here. And here also you will just go and add is what? NoOp. That is, you don't want any password encoding to happen. And I rerun my application. So this time, if I try reaching my application, and again, let me clear the history, and I try to go for, let's say, loans. So it will ask me to log in with username is what? Admin. Password is 54321. And this time I'm able to get in. That is because I have told them I don't want any password encoding to happen at all. That's fine. But that is not the safest way, right? That is not exactly the safest way. The safest way would be what? To add a password encode. Now, password encoding, it can be done. There are multiple password encoders. What I want to add up here is a bean. I want to add up a bean here at bean, which says what? I have got a public password encoder, password encoder. Okay. Now, how do we create? Default in Spring Security is bcrypt password. Now, you can generate any password using the bcrypt. So if you go to a website which is called as bcrypt generator, you'll find, for example, you want to give the password as ABC at 123. After 12 rounds of hashing, it will give me a password like this. See, and this is non-traceable. You cannot try to bring it back. So now, see, what I can do is I want to tell them that I want to add this password encoding. How? So I want to change my password for admin. I pass it like this here. And here I say it is bcrypt. Okay, this is bcrypt here. So in the bcrypt, what am I saying? I have got the encoder, but there has to be an encoder enablement for that. So what we do is return password encoder factories dot create delegating password encoder. So this is very good thing they have introduced in the new Spring version. Is we don't choose it directly. What we can do is you go to the password encoder factories. You see it creates a delegating password encoder with default mapping. So the default is what? Password bcrypt password encoder. So you see here default encoding ID is what? Bcrypt, and they set it up here. But if you want, see what you wanted was no op password encoder, you can go for here. MD4, MD5, there are various classes. SHA1, SHA256, you can check it out for here. Scrypt, bcrypt, and so on. So beneficial part here is what? That you can set it up, and then when Spring changes it, that's fine. Default looks something like this: return new bcrypt password encoder. This is how default looks like, but I don't want to do that. So this way, what is happening now? I have got a password encoder and also I've added my bcrypt password. So if I rerun my application, see, so I have got two user. One is using NoOp password and second is using bcrypt. So if I go back and if I clear my browsing data and if I go for loans, it will ask me to sign in. If I say admin, and this time I will say ABC at 123. See, it is allowing me to log in because that authentication and that password encoder came into action. So this is how you enable the password encoding. So we have added a password encoder. I will push this. Spring has given us Spring Security is they have added a new bean which you can add in your config, is to check whether the password you're trying to use is it a config, is it a uh, compromised password. So what we have got a compromised password checker, and the function, like I will say compromised password checker. And what does it return? Return new. There is a class called as have I been pawned REST API password checker. So this way it will notify us whether the password we are using just by adding up this. Now obviously ABC at 123 is a very common password, right? So I am expecting this particular new bean to help me to block it. So let's see what happens now. I go back. Let's clear the browsing history. no longer required, and all the tabs to the right. Go to the loans. Now, when I check my loans, what exactly is happening here is I say admin abc at 123. See, the password is compromised. Please change your password. This is what it is telling me. It's not telling me bad credentials. It's telling me that something is wrong. Please go and change. What I do, let me use an encryptor and use something complex password. So I can create bcrypt generator. Okay. And simply, I will create a new password here. Let's call it as code with Z at 12345. So I encrypt. I hope this is good enough password. So I replace my password bcrypt code with Z at 12345. Save it. Okay. Go back. If I say for loans, it is asking me please add in. So I say admin, and it was what code with Z at 12345. Now it is allowing me to log. Very good feature. And we have reached till a point where we have added now the compromised password checker. We have added the compromised password